Welcome back to Chasing Shadows. This is a monumental milestone for the show. This is our 10th episode, a special plunge into the darkest corners of human history. And tonight, we're tearing into one of the greatest mysteries ever told. On July 20th, 1969, NASA claimed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked the moon, broadcasting triumph to 650 million souls. But what if it was a sham? A $30 billion Hollywood hoax to dupe the world. Tonight we stack up the evidence. Motive, physics, cover-ups that scream the moon landing never happened. Then we'll lay out the counter-arguments, leaving you to decide truth or lie. Grab your tinfoil hats because by the end of this landmark episode, you'll be questioning the stars themselves. Let's dive deep into the shadows. Every conspiracy starts with a reason, and this one's ironclad. It's the 1960s, the Cold War's peak. America's bleeding. Vietnam's a disaster. Cities burn with protests, and the Soviets are owning space. Sputnik in 1957 humiliated the US with its bleeping orbit. Yuri Gagarin's 1961 flight made him the first human in space, rubbing salt in the wound. John F. Kennedy, desperate to save face, pledges in 1962 at Rice University. I'll try my best on a Kennedy impression here. We choose to go to the moon in this decade, but not because it is easy, but because it is hard. But behind the scenes, panic. NASA's tech was a joke. Their computers, less power than a 1980s Walkman, running on punch cards and magnetic tape. The Saturn V rocket, a 36-story behemoth, was barely tested for crewed missions. And the Van Allen radiation belts? Lethal zones of solar particles that would cook astronauts without military-grade shielding. Shielding NASA didn't have. Bill Casing, a Rocketdyne insider who built those rockets, blew the whistle in his 1976 bombshell. We never went to the moon. He pegged the mission's success odds at 0.0017%. A death wish, not a dream. Faking it was the only option. A staged landing would crush the Soviets' morale, distract from Vietnam's body bags, and sell America as the world's superpower. It was propaganda on steroids, worth every penny of the $30 billion budget. And the world bought it. 650 million watched Armstrong's step live. But the cracks showed fast. By 2025, with deepfakes and government lies exposed daily, doubt is everywhere. Polls show that 6 to 20% of Americans, 28% of Russians, and 25% of Brits think it was staged. Why? Because the evidence is undeniable. Let's rip it open. The visuals are where it falls apart. NASA gave us thousands of photos and hours of video. But they're a masterclass in deception. Start with the flag. Armstrong plants it in the lunar soil, and it waves like it's in a summer breeze. The moon has no atmosphere, no wind, period. Ralph Reen said in NASA Moon America, says the ripples aren't just from twisting the pole. They keep moving, like fabric in an air-conditioned hangar. Vacuum chambers on Earth don't mimic that motion. It's air, plain and simple. And the flag's crisp shape? A horizontal rod, sure, but it looks too perfect, like a prop department's wet dream. Then, the shadows. Photo AS11-40-5903 shows Aldrin in the lander's shadow, yet his suit's lit up like he's on the red carpet. The sun's the only light on the moon. Shadows should be black as coal. But these, they crisscross at weird angles, some at 45 degrees, others parallel. Photographer David Percy, a Royal Photographic Society fellow, tore into this in Dark Moon, proving it's a multi-light setup. Think studio floodlights, not sunlight. He found hot spots where light bounces unnaturally, like reflectors on a set. Then there's the fact that there were no stars in the sky. The lunar photos are pitch black above. NASA blames camera exposure. The bright surface required fast shutter speeds, washing out faint stars. But any stargazer with a decent lens can capture constellations. Why no long exposure shots? Because faking a 1969 star field was impossible. One star wrong, and every astronomer would cry foul. So they left the sky blank, hoping we'd miss it. But we didn't. And also there were the Hasselblad camera crosshairs. Etched on the lens, they should always be on top. But in some shots, rocks or gear cover them. Proof of photo compositing, like bad Photoshop. These aren't oopsies. They're fingerprints of a soundstage. Physics don't lie, but NASA's story does. The lunar module Eagle landed with 10,000 pounds of thrust, enough to blast a crater in any soil. Yet the surface beneath is pristine, like a model lowered by a crane. In a vacuum, that engine should have scorched or dug out the lunar soil, but it looks untouched. Theorists say that it's slow motion footage on Earth with wires faking low gravity. The dust looks staged like sand on a movie lot. The footprints are worse. Those crisp boot prints look like wet beach sand, not the moon's talc-like lunar soil. In 1/6 gravity and vacuum, lunar soil shouldn't hold shape without moisture. Unless it's Hollywood plaster. Hoax investigators have recreated these prints on Earth sets, but vacuum tests? They fail. Moving on to radiation that seals the deal. The Van Allen belts are death traps. Solar particles that give you radiation sickness in minutes. NASA's shielding was aluminum foil, laughably thin. Even Dr. James Van Allen, who discovered the belts, seemed to waffle on their danger. Was it pressure from above? Gus Grissom, Apollo 1's commander, called the tech junk before dying in a 1967 fire. Was that an accident? Or maybe a silenced whistleblower? The moon rocks. 842 pounds, allegedly. But Wernher von Braun's 1967 Antarctica trip collecting meteorites that mimic lunar samples. Suspicious. Labs verified them, but all of them were NASA funded. And the lost tapes? NASA accidentally erased the original Apollo 11 footage in the 1980s. That's convenient. Telemetry data. Gone. The astronauts' press conference. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins look like they've seen a ghost. Mumbling. Avoiding eyes. No joy, just fear. Then there's Stanley Kubrick. His 1968 masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey, nailed zero-G and lunar scenes. Conspiracy buffs say NASA hired him using front screen projection for Apollo's vistas. A mockumentary, Dark Side of the Moon, even has Kubrick's widow hinting at it. In 2000, Buzz Aldrin was on Conan O'Brien, and he mentioned animations. Was that a slip? What did he mean by that? And when filmmaker Bart Siebel confronted Aldrin punched him. Wonder why? Now, if we landed in 1969 with tech weaker than a Game Boy, why can't we go back? NASA's Artemis program promised a 2024 return. Artemis 2, a crewed flyby, slid to April 2026 over heat shield failures and battery issues. SpaceX's Starship keeps exploding. China's Chang'e 6 grabbed far side samples in 2024, but no humans. Why? If it was so easy, we'd be there. Social media is ablaze. 27% of 18 to 24-year-olds doubt Apollo, fueled by TikTok and Joe Rogan clips. The hoax lives because we can't replicate it. It's too perfect, too staged. Alright, We've just talked through a ton of reasons why some folks think Apollo 11 was a big hoax. It's a wild case, right? But let's sit back and chat about what the other side has to say. There are plenty of people, scientists, engineers, even regular folks, who argue NASA really pulled this off. Here's their take on those big hoax claims laid out plain and simple. You decide what holds up. So the waving flag. Some folks say it's not as fishy as it seemed. They point out the flag had a rod across the top to keep it spread out. And since there's no air on the moon, any wiggle from planting it would continue going for a bit. It's just inertia. If you watch the full videos, they say you'll see the flag settle down, just like it would in a vacuum. What about those funky shadows? The ones that don't line up or light up in places they shouldn't? Well, some argue it's all about the moon's weird landscape. The ground's not flat, it's very bumpy. And that messes with how shadows fall, making them look wonky. Plus, the lunar soil reflects light, maybe 8 to 12% of it. So it bounces sunlight into dark spots, like a natural spotlight. They say those crisscrossing shadows are just a trick of perspective, like how train tracks look like they meet in the distance. No stars in the photos? That's got a lot of people curious, but some explain it's just how cameras worked back then. The moon's surface is super bright under sunlight, so the cameras used fast shutter speeds to capture it clearly. That washes out faint stars, just like you don't see any stars in daytime photos here on Earth. They say taking long exposure shots wasn't practical when the astronauts only had a couple hours to work. Those camera crosshairs disappearing behind rocks? Some folks call it a photography quirk. Bright areas like a white hot rock can overexpose the film and make the etched crosshairs fade out. It's not proof of editing, just how old school film cameras roll. Pun intended there. Okay, what about no blast crater under the lunar module? They say the lander's engine was throttled way down to about 3,000 pounds of thrust by the time it touched down, not 10,000. In a vacuum, the exhaust spreads out sideways, not digging a big hole. They've done tests in vacuum chambers that show lunar soil scattering like that, leaving the surface mostly intact. The footprints that look too perfect. Some argue it's because lunar soil isn't like Earth's dirt. It's got this electrostatic clinginess that makes it stick together, almost like wet sand, even in low gravity. Labs have played with fake lunar soil and gotten those same crisp prints. And radiation is a big one. Those Van Allen belts sound deadly, but some say the astronauts zipped through them in 30 to 60 minutes, taking a path that dodged the worst of it. The spacecraft's aluminum shielding, they claim, was enough to keep doses low, about 1 rem, like an X-ray. NASA's got data backing this, and it lines up with what radiation experts expected. And what about the moon rocks? Those are a cornerstone for some folks. They say the rocks have stuff like helium-3 and solar wind traces you don't find on Earth. Over 3,000 scientists from all over, even Soviet teams, have poked at them and found no red flags. The Soviets' own Luna probes brought back similar samples too. What about Kubrick directing the whole thing? That's a cool story, but some call it pure fiction. The dust clouds in 2001 Space Odyssey don't move like Apollo's footage, which matches a vacuum better. In Aldrin's animation comment on Conan O'Brien, they say he was talking about TV networks using graphics to fill in when the live feed got choppy, not faking the mission. What about the missing tapes? Some point out that copies of the footage were saved and cleaned up in 2009. That awkward press conference with the astronauts looking spooked? Could just be exhaustion. Those guys were in quarantine for weeks after a wild trip. And 400,000 people working on Apollo without a single leak. They say that's because it was the real deal. Too many eyes to pull off a con like that. The Soviets never cried foul, even though they tracked Apollo live and would have loved to embarrass the US. Other countries like Japan, India, and China have sent probes that snap pictures of the landing sites, showing footprints and gear. There are even laser reflectors left on the moon from Apollo 11, 14, and 15. Observatories still bounce lasers off them today. And those Artemis delays. Some people say it's not about losing the know-how. They're building new, safer tech from scratch, and that takes time. Artemis 3 is aiming for 2027, and private landers, like one from Intuitive Machines in 2024, have checked out Apollo sites and found them intact. So there you go. The hoax side's got its suspicious photos and gut-punch distrust. The other sides lean on science, global checks, and hard evidence. Both make you wonder, don't they? It's a lot to chew on, and we're not all here to tell you what to believe. So that's your call. So, what's it gonna be? Hoax or history? We've given you the case for the moon landing being faked and the arguments saying it happened. The truth is out there, but it's your call. I want to hear your theories in the comments. Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining us on this epic 10th episode of Chasing Shadows, the podcast. See you next time, and stay curious.